whether we have to do it or not, because it was a government-enforced mandate and lockdown driven by the virus, that's a different debate. From a pay-for perspective, you got my point. I think very few members of Congress are going to be in Congress or maybe even around to pay for this 30 and 40 years from now. How much debt are we actually going to saddle on, my children and many of our viewers' kids or grandkids?
Well, the cost of government is total spending, not just debt. So the spending itself is the problem. Whether you raise taxes, which would slow the economy further, it's not necessarily progress. The Democrats want to spend $3 trillion. That was their demand. The Republicans have said they're willing to spend up to $1 trillion. And it's a good question about whether any bill is a good bill, whether this additional spending would actually help or not. One of the things the Democrats want to do is $1 trillion they want to hand to state and local governments, largely to cover the costs of previous incompetence. States like California, Illinois, New York, which have bankrupted themselves with their pension plans. That's what they want the $1 trillion for. It has nothing to do with COVID. Many states, of course, do what you're supposed to do, and they have money set aside for emergencies like this, and they can take care of this. The truly incompetent governors and the corrupt mayors who have bankrupted their cities, Chicago, their states, California, Illinois, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, they want $1 trillion to pay for mistakes that have nothing to do with COVID. The Republicans have said we're not doing that. So this is a fight about whether to pay off corrupt and incompetent governors and mayors, and the answer will be an interesting question. But the Republicans have said no, and the Democrats have those mayors and governors.
Andy, I don't blame them if that is the case. I mean, it's most of the people that are in charge right now, whether it's Governor Murphy in New Jersey, I mean, they didn't create the problem. I'm not saying they're making it better or worse, but it's been around, as Grover said, for years or even decades. We're talking about numbers that are almost incomprehensible. I mean, people don't realize, you talk about, let's call it, $2 trillion. That is 2 million millions. Are we rethinking how we think about numbers, and do they even matter anymore? Because they're so large, I'm not sure we can fully comprehend them.
So Brian, that's a good point. I think they do matter. And
that is what Pelosi is hoping.
So,
go ahead, Andy.
Go ahead.
Please.
So the numbers do matter. I mean, I worked in the Clinton White House in the 90s, where we worked with Republicans to balance the budget in 1997. Since then, we've seen presidents, Congresses uptick the budget incredibly over time. But right now, you've seen unprecedented reaction by the government, both Congress and fiscal spending, already spending $3 trillion. You've got the Federal Reserve with the capacity to spend up to $4.5 trillion. They've already spent $2 trillion. They've got another $2.5 to $3 trillion to go. And part of the reason is because we're in a pandemic and we're fighting a health crisis, which we don't also want to become a permanent fiscal crisis with respect to the economy. And you saw back earlier, making sure it didn't become a liquidity crisis. So right now, the key is both on Main Street to get money in the pockets of people so they don't get kicked out of their homes and they can eat. And for Wall Street, part of the reason the street's doing better than expected is because there is a promise from the government that they will try to stem the tide. So right now, it's about making sure we get through this crisis, and there will be a reckoning going forward.
Do you think, but Andy, let me follow up with that. I agree with everything you said. I mean, there's millions of people that are out of work through nothing that they've done or even their bosses have done or anybody. I mean, they're forced to shut down, and even if they reopen, it's 25% capacity, particularly in restaurants and hotels and leisure and things like that. But on the other hand, Andy, most of America is still working. Most of America is saving a ton of money by not doing anything. I mean, you look at savings rates, they're soaring. I just wonder if there's a more targeted way to help out, identify and help those who need it, versus throwing $1,200 or $2,400 at a family that's doing just fine, can work from home, a white-collar job, and has now just got an extra $2,400 in their pocket.
I think you're exactly right. And I think that's what part of the Republican plan is trying to do, is be targeted where the problems are, making sure you're getting it to those businesses that need them, to those families that need them. The problem is right now it's a very short time window, and can you be that targeted when you're in a negotiation where you have this anvil waiting to fall on your head when people are not going to get their checks with respect to unemployment insurance?
Yeah. And Grover, what's this going to do? I know people hate to hear this, and you probably hate to hear it as well. Federal income tax rates, middle class income tax rates, net effective after deductions and refunds are near the lowest they've ever been. People hate to hear it. They don't believe it. It's true. State taxes are up, property, local sales, I get it. But federal taxes are at basically 50-year lows. Are middle class taxes going to have to go up on a federal level?
Well, they don't have to go up, but our friend Mr. Biden, who's running for president, has promised a $4 trillion tax increase if he wins. And that will be very interesting to see how that moves forward. Plus a tax on energy, a gasoline tax on all forms of energy. President Trump has said he wants to take the corporate rate from the 21% down to 15%. And continue to reduce taxes and do more deregulation. The good news is that the fundamentals of the economy are strong. When the Republicans reduced the corporate rate down from 35, higher than communist China, to 21, below China's rate, Biden wants to take it higher than China's rate to make it tax advantage to move your business to China or Germany or almost any country in the world other than the United States. The fundamentals are good. We do need to get through this crisis of the health issue. But what the Democrats are asking for, the difference between $1 trillion and $3 trillion is the $2 trillion the Democrats want to spend on things that have nothing to do with the virus, has everything to do with bailing out incompetent, failed, and corrupt state and local governments who have failed over the last decades to manage their own budgets and come up with reasonable pay packages and reasonable pensions for government workers.